Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Managed Sales Pros Talking Point Tuesdays. I'm Kerry Simpson, and today's episode is devoted to peer-to-peer prospecting, or what I like to call cold calling like a boss. I'm going to give everybody a few minutes just to get into the room and get settled. While we're doing that, you can take a look at my favorite movie, which of course is Glengarry Glen Ross with Alec Baldwin. If you brought your coffee with you to the webinar today, you can put that coffee down because coffee is for closers only. The good news is that by the end of the webinar, you'll all be closers, so you can have your coffee back. So as we're waiting for everybody to get settled, I just want to review the agenda for today's webinar and a little bit of housekeeping. So today we're going to focus on a few things. Why cold calling still works for SMBs, specifically for IT companies. But if you're not part of an IT company, this webinar is going to be useful for you as well. I tried to be limited in my MSP and IT references so that this would be more relevant to an entire audience today. But obviously, we've built our business cold calling for IT companies primarily, and we do want to cater to that market, so there will be a few things that are IT company specific in this webinar. We're going to talk about why peer-to-peer cold calling is important to your business and why it works so well peer-to-peer. We're going to talk a little bit about call reluctance, which is the thing that stops you from making phone calls or when that phone weighs 500 pounds. We're going to talk about how to develop a guideline instead of a script. So at the end of this webinar, you should have a useful document that will allow you to plan for calls going forward. We're going to focus a little bit on how business owners can plan their time appropriately so they don't neglect prospecting. We're going to review a few of the things that will stand in the way of you and the success that you're hoping to achieve. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you can bring social media into your prospecting to supplement or augment that instead of trying to defer to using that for your entire business prospecting methodology. And then I'll take some questions at the end. So again, my name is Kerry Simpson. I'm the CEO of Managed Sales Pros. I think the most interesting thing about me is that I've been cold calling for over 20 years now, and I still cold call every day. I still teach our callers how to dial outbound. I still work with our clients very closely when developing their programs, and I still do about 20% of our outbound cold call prospecting myself. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's really important to stay engaged with the market. Two, I really enjoy it. I would not have been doing this for 20 years, and I could not have built a successful business around something that I didn't find a lot of joy in. So I still prospect every day, and we have built a fairly large business over the course of the last 3 years. We went from, myself and $0 and a Visa card and a laptop in 2014 to almost 50 telemarketers and over 3 million in revenue in 3 short years. And we did most of that by outbound cold calling. A little bit of housekeeping. You'll see a panel on the right here. You can use that panel to chat with us, ask questions. If you're going to ask questions during the webinar, I will answer them at the end of the webinar. I find it difficult to swing back and forth in between the questions and the content. So if you have questions, I ask that you just save them towards the end. You can type them in while you think of them so you don't forget, and I will answer them at the end of the webinar. If you have questions now, if you wouldn't mind if somebody wouldn't mind letting me know that you can hear me okay at this point, that would be really helpful. So if somebody just wants to type into that box, yeah, we can hear you, that would be great. Fantastic. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. All right, so let's get started. Here's why cold calling still works for the SMB market. Primarily, it still works because your target market or SMB business owners are the right age and appreciate being approached this way. So if you think about who is owning and leading small businesses, the majority of those companies are not led by people in their 20s and 30s. The majority of these groups are still led by people in their 40s, 50s, and older. And I myself, I'm 44. I own and run a small business. The people that I target are about my age as well. And I did not have a computer on my desk until probably my third or fourth job. So I was well into my late 20s before I had daily access to a computer, before I had the internet, before I had reliable internet, and before I relied on email every day to go to work. So I learned how to work using the phone. That was my job. I learned how to sell that way. I learned how to respond to inquiries that way. I was conditioned to do business on the phone. So one of the reasons that cold calling still works today is that the people that you were targeting, if you were targeting the C-suite at SMB companies, the people you're targeting primarily are going to be in that age group. So they're not spending all their time on Twitter. They're not spending all their time on email. They're still doing business the way they were conditioned to do business. Yes, there's plenty of early adopters in that age group that like to do business in other ways, and you'll identify those through the course of a cold calling program, and they'll tell you who they are. They're like, you know what, I'd prefer that you emailed me, or I prefer to do business this way. And when somebody tells you how they want to do business, that's how you do business with them, regardless of what you're trying to do. But cold calling is still effective in the SMB market because of the people you are calling. So will that change in the next 10 years, 20 years? Maybe, probably. But at this point, there is not a lot of bandwidth being consumed in that telemarketing space. Lots of people pushed over to digital and other types of marketing, and they're ignoring outbound cold calling. So you're not fighting for the same bandwidth as you are in an email inbox. So I might get a couple of hundred emails a day. I might read 2 of those. I answer my phone every time it rings, and I think a lot of small business owners are the same. For an IT specific point, you can't sell IT without a discussion, and you can't sell it without a meeting. There's no way to automate qualifying. You have to find out what's going on there to find out, A, if you want the business, and 2, if it's going to be a right fit for you, and 3, if they're going to have the budget. You're not going to be able to automate the sales process for IT. You're going to have to connect with another person. You're going to have to sell them on the idea of working with you. So that's easier to do, and you can connect faster and more intimately using the phone than you could using any other process. The barrier to adoption for managed services can be 0, right? So if they're not already using something to solve the problem, you don't have to pitch them on the idea of completely replacing what they're already doing. You just have to suggest a better way of doing things. So that's something to consider when you're putting together an outbound campaign of any kind. What are the barriers to adoption? So what's getting in the way of you being able to close that business? You're not going to be able to close it on the phone. You're not going to be able to close things like that in one call or one close, but you are going to be able to develop the relationship and begin having the conversation a whole lot faster picking up the phone. So what does peer-to-peer mean? In this case, we're talking about one business owner or business leader, so one business founder or business CEO calling into another business to speak with the founder or CEO of that business. So you're looking at an outbound target of somebody who has essentially the same job title as you do. And that's going to help you increase your business and improve your business. And I'll share with you a couple of reasons why that's so. So one of the things that makes peer-to-peer cold calling so important and so successful is there's no supplication in the process. You are not a sales rep trying to get a few scraps of attention from the CEO of a prospective company. You are a peer. You are an equal. You're experiencing the same challenges running and building your business. So that connection isn't coming from a place of like, please, please give me your business so much as a, hey, you have problems, I have problems. We can solve these problems together. You get to create a very interesting connection when you're calling peer-to-peer, right? There's all kinds of things that you can talk about, and that doesn't have to be a completely 100% sales-focused conversation. Sales reps may be able to reach the C-suite and pitch to them effectively, but they're never going to understand the same pressures as that C-suite individual is experiencing, right? I've got sales reps, I'm sure they've never stayed up at night wondering if they were going to make payroll next month, right? So you've got a very unique connection with the person that you're reaching out to. You're probably at some point going to be trying to solve the same problems. And as you're building your network, you can engage with people over all kinds of things. You don't have to have a specific 100%, hey, I'm trying to sell you something, will you buy it conversation. You can have a conversation about all kinds of business challenges. You can create that connection that's going to lay the foundation for an opportunity for you to sell something to them down the road, or potentially sell to somebody that they know. And that leads me to my next point. Peer-to-peer cold calling builds powerful referral networks in your community. So if you're a big believer in the go-giver philosophy, if you truly and genuinely are interested in people when you're calling out, not only are you going to be able to position yourself for success, but you're going to be able to position other people in your network for success. So if you consider outbound prospecting peer-to-peer as less of a I have to make this sale process and more of a how can I help this person genuinely build their business this year, you're going to find a great deal of success. And if you become known as the person in your community that is always able to refer someone else to someone else, people will start calling you and looking for those people. And those people will remember you when the time to do so arises. So creating a referral network is a two-way street, and every dial you make should be building that referral network for you. One of the ways that peer-to-peer calling is going to help you improve your business and not just build your business is as you're calling into niche verticals, you're going to learn more about how those companies do business. And if you've pawned that job off on a sales rep, they're going to be the ones learning how those verticals run and not you. So a lot of times companies come to me when they're in a growth stage saying like, well, we want to hire a sales rep. And I'll say, great, tell me about how you're currently targeting these 3 niches. And they'll say, oh, well, we haven't really done that yet. We're going to hire a sales rep and they're going to do that. I would argue that until you are an expert in the niches that you want your sales reps to target, you are not ready to pursue those niches yet. You need to, point 4, learn the skills that you want to train. So if you want to bring a sales rep in, or if you want to bring a prospector into your company, you need to have that skill set in order to replicate and share it with another person. It's one of the reasons I think that some smaller businesses struggle. They bring in new people to try things that they don't have the skills for, but they really have no idea what to do with them when they get into the role. And I mean, we've experienced that in our company as well. Like, we may have the opposite problem of other companies. Sales for us is pretty easy. Everything else we needed to learn. So if you already know how to do something really well, you're going to be able to teach that really well. The rest of it, you're going to have to slowly and gradually get better at yourself before you can share that wisdom with somebody else in your company. And yes, you can hire other people to do it. That's always an option, but you want to have some understanding of how your sales cycle works. So if you are a small business owner who's never done any cold calling, who's relied on referrals to date to build their business and doesn't really have an outbound sales process set up, you are going to struggle bringing someone else into your business to do this for you. You need to learn how to do it first, then you can bring somebody else in to take over once you understand what you want them doing and how you can help them get better at it. So how do you get started if you've never made a single cold call? Start where it's easiest. So before you pick up the phone and call completely cold, random strangers to offer them your services, there's lots of easy places to start making calls where you can get really good at pitching your business and asking other people for their business. So start with your business network, start with your personal network, start with your current clients. That's going to be the 3 easiest spots for you to build your business quickly. So what's stopping you right now from just picking up the phone and calling people? Most of the time it comes down to call reluctance. And sure, there's 100 other reasons that it might be, but most of the time people just don't like the idea of making cold calls. They feel anxious and nervous about it. The idea of it is unpleasant to them. They feel like they're bothering people. That's something you're going to have to get over really quickly. One of the things that I like to say to brand new callers when they come into our business, people who've never picked up the phone before, is the only thing that can't be taught is enjoyment, right? The only thing I can't teach you how to do is like your job. And if part of your job is going to be cold calling, you're going to have to learn to find a place where that activity brings you some joy. So if you go into a cold call always expecting that you're going to have to make a sale on that call, you're really going to hate cold calling, because 1 out of every 2,000 dials is going to result in an opportunity, right? That's a lot of calling to get one deal. If the only thing that you like is winning, cold calling is not going to be fun for you. So you need to think about cold calling differently. Cold calling is an educational process. Cold calling is a way to engage with the people around you and learn more about their businesses and hopefully genuinely help them get better at something. So if you have something of value to offer another company, somebody at that company is being paid to improve that company, period. Right? It is their job to take your call if you can show them a better way of doing things. That's my job as the leader of my business, to find better ways to run my business. If you can show me how to do that, I owe it to my stakeholders to take your call. If you don't believe that you're selling the greatest thing, the best thing, the most wonderful thing in the world, probably time to start looking for something different to sell. That is the one thing that you're going to be able to bring to the table better than everyone else. Now, you can be horrible at cold calling as long as you're enthusiastic. You can say all the wrong things at all the wrong times as long as you are genuine and trying to connect with other people. It is very hard to mess up cold calling. So there are some things that you can do to get yourself through that initial angst. So if you're feeling really anxious today about the idea of picking up the phone, dialing, and trying to connect to random strangers, call your current clients and try and sell them something new. So look at your client roster. Is everybody on that roster buying everything you sell? No. Start calling them and try and sell them more stuff. That's a great way to get through that initial pick up the phone anxiety. These people know you and they like you and they trust you. You know that because they're already purchasing things from you. So it shouldn't be anxiety producing to reach out to them. Don't do this by email. The whole point of this is getting through call reluctance, getting used to picking up the phone, having conversations, guiding those conversations to places that you want them to go. If you don't have anybody to sell anything new to, it's time to call your clients and ask them for referrals. So call the people that know you and like you and trust you and ask them to connect you with other people that they know and like and trust. We did a whole series on referrals. If you go to our YouTube channel after this, if you want to learn how we collect referrals or how we encourage other people to do so, there's lots of content there. So I'm not going to go too aggressively into how to ask for referrals. We've already done a webinar on that. But start calling your current clients and asking them, who do they know that might be able to use your services? Go through your Rolodex, and I'm dating myself a little bit there. I don't know, your Outlook contacts, whatever. Reconnect with anybody that you haven't spoken with in a long time. So all those people that you said, hey, we should have a drink sometime, and then never called, start calling those people. Invite them to get together. And the point of doing this isn't so much to build your business as it is to begin building your network so that you can build your business, and just getting used to asking people for things. Right? Asking people to connect with you, finding out what works best for them, how does the conversation flow, where's the best time that you can segue into that ask in a conversation. It's a whole lot easier to do that with friendly people that probably do want to have a drink, and you know this because once upon a time you met them somewhere and both of you agreed that you were going to do it sometime. That's going to be an easy conversation, and the more easy conversations you can have, the less frightening the idea of the very next phone call is going to be. I don't recommend calling people that you haven't spoken with in 4 years and asking them for referrals. That's kind of a jerk move. Take them out for a cup of coffee, go have lunch with them, start developing your relationship with them again. Maybe ask them how you can help them build their business, and then go ahead and start asking them for referrals from their network. You can do this on LinkedIn and any other social media platform as well. How many people are you connected to on LinkedIn that you've never actually met in real life? Like, there are hundreds of people on my LinkedIn in my city that I don't actually know. I'm not in my city very often these days, but when I am, I make it a point of going through LinkedIn, connecting with people and saying, hey, you know, we connected on LinkedIn, but we've never actually met in real life. Do you want to have a drink next week? So think about ways where you can begin connecting that are non-threatening to you, non-anxiety producing, and the more you can get used to just picking up the phone instead of defaulting to other methods of communication, right? Don't text them, call them. Don't email them, call them. Get used to using the phone to ask people for stuff. The next natural step in that process is going to be cold calling. I want you to picture cold calling as a networking event. You walk into a room and there's 50 people in the room that you don't know, and you've got business cards in your pocket, and you're going to go talk to all of them, explain what you do, and hand them a card. That's cold calling, except it's a whole lot faster and easier to do than it is to try to connect with 50 independent people at a party. So when you get ready to start calling, you're going to want to have something in front of you that guides the conversation. We don't really use scripts here. We use something called talking points or a calling guideline. And what that's going to do is help keep you on track through the conversation. So if you get sidelined, it's always going to bring you back to a place where you can continue to move the conversation forward. So guidelines that we develop here include an introduction statement for a gatekeeper. So somebody's going to pick up the phone. What are you going to say to them? An introductory statement for your peer or prospect. You know, the decision maker is going to pick up the phone. What are you going to say to them? You want a list of factual things that you can say about your company. I like to get everything fluffy, so take your marketing materials. This is a great exercise. Take everything that you're using currently to try and win new business, your website, any white papers, any sort of marketing slicks. Take a big black Sharpie marker and cross off anything that can't be quantified. So any place where it says the best, the greatest, the most, the whatever, like you aren't those things. You can't prove those things, right? Did you win an award for that thing? Then it's probably not true. Take anything that isn't a factual statement out of your speech for cold calling. You're going to give them the facts and just the facts. They can decide if you're the best or the greatest or the most wonderful. But those fluffy words turn people off, right? When they say, we're the best this or we're the greatest that, like, how do you know that? Have you side by side compared your services with every other service in the geography and in the market? That's probably not true. If you have some case studies, vertical by vertical, you want to print those out so that you can reference them during the calls that you're going to make. People are going to ask you, who do you work with? You want to be able to quickly tell them not only who do you work with, but what have you done for them. If you do not have those case studies, you want to get them built. So you can work with an expert to build them, you know, connect somebody who does some great writing with your client base and start building out those case studies or testimonials. They're great for your sales process as well. And if you don't have them and you're not prepared to get them written right now, then you want to go person by person through your client list and just make a list of the things that you did for them that you know improved their business and how they improved their business, because people are going to want to know that. They don't just want to know, for example, that Managed Sales Pros made 50,000 cold calls last month. They want to know how many of those calls converted into appointments and how many of those appointments converted into sales. So the less fluffy and the more quantifiable you can be during your conversations, the more likely it is that people are going to go to the next step with you. You'll want to have a list of what we call open-ended discussion drivers that you can use to guide your conversations. So the difference between an open-ended question and a closed-ended question is how that question can be answered. Open-ended questions require a response, and closed-ended questions can be answered with a yes or a no. You'll also want a list of tell me more questions, which are actually pretty easy questions to ask. So let's review those a little bit one by one. An introduction for the gatekeeper. Now remember that the gatekeeper can be anybody. It's somebody picking up the phone. They aren't necessarily a receptionist. They're just the person that's answering the phone before you get to talk to the person who actually makes the decision. And remember that that person could be the decision maker. So you always want to approach anyone who answers the phone at a company as a potential decision maker. I answer our phone here all the time, and I'm always surprised at the number of people that try and bully through me without clarifying who I am, what my role in the company is, what I do here. Like, well, I own the company. Is that helpful to you? So never treat anybody as just the anything when you're cold calling. There's no such thing as just the receptionist in most small businesses. Most of the time the receptionist is the HR manager as well, right? So when you're calling it a small business, treat everybody as if they were potentially the person that was going to sign the check. So when you're calling peer-to-peer, you're going to approach these calls differently than you would if you were a sales rep. You're the boss. Sound like the boss. You're going to call in confidently, and you want to differentiate that on the sales call. So when you're asking to be put through to somebody, you want to clearly state who you are. You're the CEO of this company, and you want to speak to the CEO of their company. Help them understand that you're on par with their boss. So you need to do this in a way that doesn't make you come off as a jerk, obviously. You're no better than anybody, but what you want them to know is that you aren't, Joe sales rep calling from ABC company. You own ABC company, and you want to speak to the person that owns their company. So here's one of the examples that you could use if you already have the name of the person that you want to call. So if you were an IT company, for example, hi John, it's Kerry calling. I'm the president of Everywhere Managed. We're a local IT company and we support law firms. I'd like to speak with, name of the managing partner, whoever that is. Can you let him know I'm calling, please? Easy introduction, not hard to memorize. You'll get used to saying it really easily. And if you don't have the name, and quite often you may not. Hi Jane, I hope you can help me. My name is Kerry Simpson. I'm the president of Everywhere Managed. We're a local IT company. I'd like to speak with the CEO of your company about partnering. What is the best way to schedule some time with her? So ask them to help you. Ask them to help you get through to the person that you want to engage with. Sometimes at this point in the conversation, they'll say, oh, well, that person doesn't make the decisions about IT, and they'll direct you somewhere else. But if you want to talk about partnering, and you should be talking about partnering when you're calling peer-to-peer because you're trying to build your network, and part of your network is going to be bringing referrals to the people in your network. So you want to have a conversation that's focused on not only, hey, can we do some business together, but hey, how can I help you grow your business? Here's how you can help me grow my business. So think very carefully about who you know that you might be able to introduce to other people in your network. Right? It's going to be a whole lot easier to call into the CEO or the managing partner or what have you of any business if you've already got a lead that you can bring to them. So if somebody in your network has mentioned, hey, we're looking for a new lawyer, whole lot easier to call into a law firm and say, you know what, I have a potential prospect for you. Here's their name and contact information. Oh, by the way, how are you having this need met? So once you've reached the person that you want to speak with, the opener is going to vary wildly by the decision maker. So if you know anything about the person that you're calling at this point, if you're calling into your Dream 100, for example, you should know a little bit about them. Do you share any connections? Are you on the same boards? Do you share any hobbies? Do you know any of the same people? Do you sell to the same types of businesses? Do you have a client in the same building as they do? Are you an expert in the vertical that they work in? Do you have potential business already to drive their way? Did you read an article about them? Like, where did the lead come from? And you can call in completely cold, so don't spend all your time researching people. When we talk about using factual statements, we do that so that people aren't turned off by anything too gushy or unquantifiable, right? So the things that people usually want to know that if you don't know off the top of your head, or you want to just stay completely organized for the call for, which is why I write them down. People will want to know, how long have you been in business? Where are you located? How many clients do you have? What kind of clients do you work with? Why are you a great partner? Right? Nothing should be fluffy or subjective there. So make a list of every factual statement you can think of where somebody might have asked you that question, and you've got a reference right there. And if people are asking you questions about your business, instead of going off on a long rant, you can very clearly state, Here's why we're a great company to do business with. You know, we've been in business for 4 years. We grew 400% last year. We've grown from 5 telemarketers in 2015 to 50 telemarketers in 2017. Our clients often see 20% conversion on the leads that we schedule for them, and so on and so forth. So an open-ended question, again, is a question that can't be answered with a yes or a no. And you want to use these questions appropriately throughout the conversation so that the conversation keeps going. The longer you can keep somebody talking to you, the more likely it is that you are going to get an appointment with them or get past their initial objections. Open-ended questions written down on a piece of paper or posted somewhere or on your other monitor somewhere where you can see them quickly allows you to not accidentally ask a question that shuts the conversation down. So anytime you ask a question that can be answered no, you do run the risk of them saying no, and it's almost impossible to recover the call at that point. Can you see how this would benefit your business? No. How do you come back from that? So you want to find ways to ask questions to people that require them to answer and not just easily default to yes or no. So they're questions that lead to other questions, questions that lead to problems that you can solve for them, and questions that again can be followed up with other questions. So focusing on IT again, some samples of open-ended discussion driver questions that we train to here at Managed Sales Pros. How do you currently receive your IT support? Who's responsible for your business continuity planning? What do you think your biggest challenge with IT has been this year? How are your competitors using technology differently than you are? What does unscheduled downtime cost you? So all of those questions, easily referenced, can't be answered no. It's going to encourage them to either throw out an objection, and sometimes that objection will be something just to get you off the phone, but most of the time the objection is going to allow you to ask another question and keep the conversation going a little bit longer. So whenever somebody won't answer a question, odds are they let the conversation go on a little bit longer than they had intended to, and now they're kind of like, how am I going to get out of this? So in those cases, your best course of action is to ask them when a good time to follow up would be, take their information, and move on. Anytime somebody won't answer a question, just ask if you can follow up with them in a certain set amount of time, and can you send them some information. Now you've got opt-in email permission, very important in Canada, and you have the opportunity to call in again in a week and ask them. Another great thing about asking, can I send you some information, is now you've got the opportunity to keep that conversation going again. So if somebody shuts you down after an open-ended question, you ask, can you send them some information? They say yes, they provide their email address. Now you ask them, what are you most interested in receiving from us? That should open up the conversation again, and you may be able to keep them on the phone just that extra couple of minutes, and that's enough time to allow you to begin building rapport, earning their trust, and asking for an opportunity to present to them. Tell me more questions, or questions that you use sometimes when you're trying to buy yourself some time, sometimes when they say something that you don't understand. So for example, quite often if we're prospecting into a manufacturing vertical on behalf of a client, they will use abbreviations that we don't understand. They will use the names of software tools that we've never heard of. They will ask questions that are, kind of out of the blue and weird, and you need to buy yourself a little time to figure out what they're talking about. So, I always have a second monitor open, and if somebody says something that I don't understand, I ask a tell me more question. I let them talk to me about that, and while they are doing that, I go and research a little bit quickly so that I can come back to them with a more intelligent question than, what's that? Don't be afraid to say, I don't know what that is, but I would prefer to come back with a question. So the tell me more questions are usually just brief questions that will either allow you to learn a little bit more about sometimes what they're already doing to solve a problem. Sometimes they just buy you a little time. So tell me more about that. How have you already tried to solve that? How would you begin fixing that today? What do you think caused that? How many ways to approach that problem do you think there might be? So some of these questions, especially in IT, I like because it allows you to try and figure out if they're the kind of client that you want to work with. So a question like, how have you already tried to solve that? Well, we hired an IT company last year and they were horrible and we fired them after a month, and we hired another company and they were horrible and we fired them after a month. Like, if you see a pattern emerging, maybe this is business that you don't want to go after all. Closed-ended questions come into play when you need to qualify. So you open the conversation with an open-ended question, you ask a tell me more question to get them to share a little bit more about what's going on there, and then you use closed-ended questions to qualify leads. So there's two ways to use closed-ended questions. You can use them at the very beginning. So you can identify, do they have enough computers right at the beginning of the call? Or peer-to-peer, I encourage you to qualify at the end of calls, because even if they're not a great fit for you, you want to build your network. You want to find more referrals. You want to find more opportunities in your market. So use the closed-ended qualifiers at the end of the conversation. So even if it turns out that you want 20 computers minimum to do business with a company, and it turns out they have 5, you may have just made a great friend. You may well have a great referral partner there. You need to have the conversation with them. And if you qualify at the beginning and abandon the call, you'll never get to have that conversation. So closed-ended qualifiers are things that you need to know to decide if you want the meeting, right? So one of the biggest qualifying questions, probably not as relevant in peer-to-peer. I mean, who is going to be above the CEO or the business owner at this point? But there may be other people that are going to be included on that decision, and you don't want to have a meeting in a vacuum with somebody who's then going to make you come in and meet with another 4 people. So if you're going for coffee, great. If you're going in to present your solution, you want to make sure that all stakeholders are present. So find out who needs to be here for this meeting. Is there a budget earmarked for IT support? Again, if your only purpose for the call is, I want to sell something to this company, budget is a hugely important piece of the puzzle. You do not want to drive an hour across town and sit in an hour-long meeting and do 2 hours of follow-up and write a proposal for a company that it turns out only had $20 a desktop and you charge $100, right? Like, you want to find out what their budget is. And then a big one for IT is you want to know how many computers they have there. So anytime you use these qualifying questions, you have to be prepared for the conversation to wind down. This is why I encourage you to use them at the end in peer-to-peer as opposed to at the beginning. So once you get through all of that, how do you ask for things? You want to use a process that allows them to say yes easily. So you ask for the appointment. You provide 2 or 3 options for times. You ask in an open-ended way and not a closed-ended way. So you don't want to be the person who'll meet with them anytime about anything, right? You're a busy person. They're a busy person. You don't want to be the person who says like, oh, I can meet you at 3. Oh, but if that's not good for you, I can meet you at 4. I can meet you at 6. I can meet you whenever's good for you. Like, you're busy. I can meet you at 2 o'clock on Wednesday, or I have some time 5 o'clock on Wednesday. What would work best for you? Let them choose a time. After you make an ask of any kind, stop talking, right? Don't offer them extra and additional choices unless they come back to you with a comment. So instead of, get comfortable in silence. When you ask someone a question, stop and say nothing until they answer it, whether that question is a question about their business or whether that question is an ask for something. When you're asking for referrals, for example, you want to use that same pause approach. Who do you know that might be able to use our services? And then stop talking. This is kind of self-evident to me, but I like to review it with people. Don't put the burden of scheduling an appointment on your peer. Right? Don't make them send the Outlook invitation. That's all on you. Make sure they have all the information that they need at their fingertips. Make it as easy as possible for them to get that appointment on their calendar. So here we have a saying, it's call your mother and take the meeting. Right? If another CEO is going to make time to talk to you, you should take your meeting regardless of qualifiers. Never eat a meal alone. You got 3 of them in a day. There's no reason that you can't be building your network during those meals. Start building that network. If you appropriately build a referral network, you will not have to cold call, period. Something to consider. So how do you plan to be successful? Unless you're a full-time cold caller, and most people are not, especially the people that are sitting on this webinar today, you're going to have to create a plan for prospecting. How much time realistically can you dedicate to this activity? Like, everybody leaves a webinar all eager and excited to try some new stuff, but realistically, how much time are you going to do this for every day? Is it an hour? Is it 2 hours? Decide and then honor that commitment. So it goes into your calendar the same way that any other meeting would go into your calendar, and you need to honor it the same way you would honor a prospect appointment or an appointment with one of your clients, right? It goes into your calendar and every day you stick to it. So something to remember when you're making your time allotment for cold calling. You're going to have follow-up activities, proposals to write, and meetings to attend, but you're still going to need to commit to adding new leads into your pipeline every day. So even if you've got 10 proposals on the go, you want to be committed to that hour of looking for new leads every day. Because once you stop looking for those, if all 10 of those proposals die on the vine and they ghost you, you've got nothing new coming in. So as you go through your network and as you begin cold calling, you're going to see an interesting shift in how you spend your time every day. So at the beginning, you might spend 2 hours cold call prospecting every day. A month later, you'll have a lot of follow-up activities to do. So you might spend an hour cold call prospecting every day and an hour doing follow-up activities every day. After cold calling for any significant period in your market, eventually, if you're in a smaller market, you're going to run out of net new opportunity and all of your activity will be follow-up. As a business leader who's only got an hour of cold calling to do every day, that's probably a more infinite schedule. But you still have to create that time, make that time, and honor that time. And I'm telling you, if you stop, start, cold calling will not work for you. You need to do it every day. So one of the best ways to stay on track is to set activity goals. And those can be simple, like I'm going to make 10 calls today, or they can be more complicated, like I'm going to learn this piece of information about every company that I call into today. If you get interesting with those activity goals, you'll find that cold calling becomes quite fun. Like I will set a goal of trying to find out, for example, best restaurant in Carolina today. I'm going to ask everybody what their favorite restaurant is. So you can have a little bit of fun with it. It doesn't have to be all, 100% business focused. You can be a real human person and cold call and be authentic and be genuine and have a good laugh and tell a joke or hear a joke. Like, you can have a good time doing this. You don't have to be so robotic. That's one of the reasons we discourage script use. You don't want to be a robot. You want to connect with another person. So the activity goals don't have to be 100% focused on, I am going to make 20 dials every day. Find things that are interesting to you and build your goals around that. So one of the things that's going to cause you the biggest amount of trouble while you're beginning cold calling is the pitfall of researching instead of calling. Right? Your calling time is calling time. You want to ask your questions to real people, not the internet. So one of the ways that we've gotten really proficient here is we have 2 monitors open at any time. The CRM's in one of them. The company page of LinkedIn comes up on the other monitor. So if you don't know something, you can quickly go reference it. You don't want to spend 10 minutes or 20 minutes researching every person that you're going to call. 1,000 dials to 1 appointment, 1,000 dials to 1 appointment. So you have to pick up the phone 1,000 times to get in front of somebody. 20 minutes of research by 100 companies is 33 hours of research. When are you going to have time to do that? You are far better off to call in, ask a couple of questions of anybody that picks up the phone. Don't get sucked into the vortex that is LinkedIn. So here are some things that you can avoid. Avoid defaulting to email. And that goes back again to call reluctance, right? The email is the easier, softer way to go through it. It's not as anxiety producing, it's not intimidating, but it's also not as effective. So try not emailing anybody until you've spoken to somebody first. Don't get caught up in writing the perfect email because people aren't reading them. Right? Cut and paste the same email response to anybody that asks you to send them information. Right? send that information and get back on the phone. A conversation is always going to be your fastest route to an answer. So instead of emailing someone and asking them to clarify something, just pick up the phone and call them. This is a big one. Avoid cherry picking. Like, this is something that we have to drill into our callers over and over again. It is not their job to decide who will or will not be interested in our clients' products or services. So even if you've tried to reach them 50 times, you call them the 51st time. Let the prospect disqualify themselves. There's nothing worse in a market than looking at a lead and going, oh, they would never be interested in my services, right? Only to find out that they in fact were interested and they just bought something from your competitor. So have the conversation with everybody and let them tell you flat out, no, we're not interested. No, that's not a fit for us. Remember, you're building your network as well. So the primary purpose of your call may be to win business. Your secondary purpose is to build your network and to help them build theirs. So the most important thing to remember when you're building your business through cold call prospecting is to keep your commitments. You asked for the meeting or you committed to following up at a certain time. Their time is valuable and your time is valuable. Things are going to happen, but if you promised a good prospect that you would call them back Thursday at 2 and they're sitting waiting for your call and you've gone off to fight another fire and just totally neglected that follow-up call, that is business that you are never going to win. So when you make a commitment to a prospect, honor it. That goes back to planning. If you know that you're only ever going to have an hour a day available to do this, remember that you're going to have to schedule those follow-up calls within that hour that you've allotted for your calling. So be mindful of that when you're calendaring things. You don't want to schedule things through times when you know you're going to have to be invested in other parts of your business. So one of the things that we've done to be really successful here is add a little bit of extra in after that initial call. So don't use LinkedIn to prospect, but definitely use LinkedIn to follow up and connect with people. So what I like to do is leave a voicemail. Hey, it's Kerry calling from Managed Sales Pros. I'm sorry I missed you today. I wanted to talk to you about prospecting and share a little bit about how we helped ABC IT add 500 opportunities to their pipeline over the last 2 years. I'm going to connect with you on LinkedIn. You can take a look at some of our testimonials, see if we know anybody in common, and if you want to meet, maybe you could just send me a quick note back. Now then you send the connection request on LinkedIn with all of your contact information. What I really like about LinkedIn, and if you're not already buying the premium version of LinkedIn, you should be, because it allows you to connect with a lot more people. It shows you if somebody's gone to visit your profile. So if all of a sudden this random person is viewing my profile, I can go back and look and say, oh yeah, I called them a week ago. So not only did they listen to my voicemail, they were interested enough to go look up my profile on LinkedIn, and maybe they accept the request or maybe they don't, but now is a great time to call them back. So make sure anybody who's looking your LinkedIn profile, you're reaching out to immediately. So put them on the callback schedule for the next day. So how can Managed Sales Pros help? We can do your prospecting for you. Obviously, we've built a very successful business doing outbound prospecting, but we can also teach you how to prospect. So if you don't want to outsource your prospecting, I am more than happy to come in and teach you how to do it a little more in depth than we reviewed today. And there's plenty of free books and prospecting advice on our blog. You can access them anytime at managedsalespros.com/blog. So if you have any questions now, I'm available for about the next 15 minutes. So I'm going to open up the floor, just type them in, and I'm happy to answer them. And if you have a question after the event finishes and you'd like a response, there's my Twitter handle, my phone number, and my email address. You're more than welcome to contact me that way. So one of the questions is, do you have any suggestions on how to build a list to cold call? And my suggestion is buy a list. Building a list is going to take you a great deal of time. So there are plenty of ways that you can go and build lists for next to nothing. One of them is your local library. So there is a service at most US libraries that allows you access to data for free. If you would like more information on that, please send me a quick email after this webinar finishes, and I will send you what I know. I personally have never tried that. We buy most of our data from Dun & Bradstreet, but there's also Info USA, and I think Info USA owns Sales Genie. We built lists at the beginning using things like LinkedIn, so you could put in, this is the type of company we want, and this is the size of the company, but then you have to go and look up their phone numbers on their website addresses, and it's a lot of work that you could be doing something better with. So the way I like to look at projects like that is, can I pay somebody less than I make to do this for me? So if I charge $150 an hour to a client for on-site IT support, should I be trying to save a couple bucks building my own lists? No. If you've got kids, sure, send them to build your list. Send them to the internet. They're probably better at it than you are. Otherwise, go buy yourself a list of 500 companies, spend the $500, and begin prospecting using that list. So the next question is, if we are new to cold calling, how much of a time investment should we be spending? So is the question, I'm not sure if I understand the question, Scott. Do you want to type it in one more time a little bit differently? Are you wondering how much time you'd have to spend working with our company before you saw results, or how much time you as a business owner should expect to spend prospecting before you see results? 1 month isn't adequate regardless. So so why do you think so many other talking heads are saying cold calling doesn't work anymore? Because they're trying to sell you software, Dawn. That's why. Everybody wants the easy way out, right? Like, who doesn't? Who wouldn't like a fast, automated process to build their business? And at the end of the day, I mean, I really like cold calling, but I know that most people do not. That's one of the reasons that we've been so successful. We found something that we were good at. We found a way to replicate the process, and we offered it up to the market. Right? People that are saying cold calling doesn't work are people that aren't very good at cold calling to begin with. I know a lot of our competitors have decided to go the digital route now in addition to cold calling. We don't use any digital marketing at all here. Like, we do outbound prospecting only. We support it with email when someone says, please send me an email, but we don't do any automated anything. Everything here is done by a one-on-one process of one caller calling on behalf of one client, trying to reach their prospects and create a meaningful connection with them. Oh, how many months should we be working with you in order to see some sizable results? Scott, probably you won't see ROI on a cold calling campaign with an outsourced provider for over a year. So you're in for a year before you start making your money back on it. It's a long process. The first 3 months is a lot of taking out the garbage. So when you begin calling, or when an outsourced provider, for example, begins calling, you're going to end up, 30% of the list that you work on is going to be garbage. So 30% of your calls are wasted going into a vortex of bad numbers and nonsense. And then you begin scheduling follow-up activities, or what I like to say, what I like to describe as action cards. So you put the action cards on the table, and then stuff starts to happen. But it's a long process. Second question. You have a great metric on 1,000 calls per appointment times number of appointments to close a deal. Can you share any metrics on ROI for our services? So most of the companies that we've seen stick with cold call prospecting for more than 2 years are seeing a 500% ROI. So if you don't look at prospecting as a how many meetings am I going to get for the investment that I am making, and look at it more as a how many deals do I need to close to make this make sense to me? So for example, and we charge $6,000 a month. I have no problem sharing that publicly. That's our rate for MSP outbound cold call prospecting. How many deals do you have to close to make it make sense for you to spend $72,000 a year on an outsourced prospecting company? Work backwards from that number instead of working forwards from, well, I have to get 10 appointments a month. Do you? I would argue that if we put 1 or 2 leads into your pipeline every month and they both had 50 seats and one of them closed every month, that you would continue paying me until the dawn of time. So look at ROI and not how many appointments did I get? How many appointments did I get? Are you getting the right appointments? So even yourselves personally prospecting outbound right now. So if you're going to begin prospecting today, don't get hung up on how many meetings did I get this month, or start thinking long term about this. It's a long game. Track everything meticulously. That is the only way you're going to decide whether or not cold calling is a good use of your time. Anyone else have a question today? Next question, should someone looking into cold calling also be doing other forms of advertising at the same time? Do they run in conjunction? Scott, we have seen no evidence of this, and we've tried it. We partnered with several marketing firms over the course of the last couple of years trying to find programs that would dovetail nicely into each other. I have seen zero evidence that cold calling needs to run in tandem with something else to work. I'm not saying that the other methods don't work. I'm saying they don't impact your cold calling campaign at all, and vice versa. So what do you think, just a quick question for everybody, what do you think should be the first thing that somebody does when they get a cold call? If somebody calls you and gets you on the phone and starts talking about their business, what's the first thing you do? Right, anybody answer that question? What would you do first? While you're talking to them, probably. Okay, so my answer would have been, look at their website. Scott, maybe cold calling isn't the approach for you then. But normally what happens, like if somebody calls me and tells me about, and I take all the cold calls that come my way because I'm expecting that I might learn something. Right? Like I want to see how other people are selling. I want to see if there's stuff out there I haven't tried, or things that are, that's a great source of free information. So my thoughts when we were calling were that if we can show our clients that every time we call someone, somebody goes to visit their website, we can show them these phenomenal numbers about what their traction in the market looks like. And we saw zero evidence that calling people resulted in them going to visit the websites of the companies we were calling. And then we started calling people that were visiting our clients' websites. So we put some software on our clients' websites and we tracked it. Who's visiting the website, and then we would call them, and we saw zero increase in the uptake of number of appointments we were able to schedule. So I'm just not seeing evidence that you need to dovetail those programs into one another. Run them independently and see what happens. Scott, your cold calling karma is going to be bad if that's what you're doing. I just want you to bear in mind that if you want other people to take your sales calls, you should probably start taking other people's sales calls, just, so the delicate balance of the universe isn't off kilter. So next question is, do you have some tips on how we can determine where in the sales cycle the prospect may be? And the answer to that is usually contingent on contract end date. So first of all, are they having that need met in another way? Right? Most of the time, if you're calling for managed services, they are getting that need met somehow. Any company with more than 20 computers is getting their needs met somehow. Either they have somebody in-house that does it, or maybe it's a friend, maybe they're already outsourcing, and maybe they're working with one of your competitors. The way to evaluate where they're going to be in their buying cycle is when are they going to look at changing what they're doing right now. So if they just signed a deal, for example, with one of your competitors and it's a 2-year deal, they're off the table for 2 years, right? Where they are in their sales cycle is at 0. Whereas if they're coming up on 90 days before their current contract is expiring, that is an opportunity, right? If you can insert a wedge in between them and their current provider, they're a whole lot closer to the end of the sales cycle than that company we just talked about where they just re-signed with another organization. So most of the time, you're going to learn where they are in their sales cycle contingent on the data that you can collect on the call. So that's the big one. When are you going to make a decision about this? But an easier way to ask that is, when does your contract with them expire? Or when are you open to receiving proposals from other vendors? Can I answer any more questions today? Well, it was a real pleasure. Thanks for joining me today. I appreciated your time. My contact information is right there on the screen. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them. This webinar will be available on our YouTube channel once I download and convert it. So if you'd like to watch it again or share it with anyone in your network, you're encouraged to do so. Thanks again for your time. I am taking a month off of Talking Point Tuesdays because I am going to Mexico and I have no idea what my Wi-Fi connection is going to be like there. So a month off from Talking Point Tuesdays, but I look forward to sharing more information with you in March. Thanks again and have a great day.